Older single women can easily become targets of romance scams. So, why do we say that? First, many older single women have their standards shaped by the male leads in idol dramas. This often leads to years of being single, leaving them clueless about love and relationships and craving affection. When a good-looking and seemingly successful man enters their lives, they tend to fall for him quickly. Even if they have some reservations, the hope that he might be genuine often overpowers their doubts, especially when they're at a low point emotionally. These men typically live far away, have secretive jobs, or claim that their family members are sick. When the woman suggests moving in together, he always has a slew of excuses ready to keep things long distance. These scammers often go after older single women with a bit of savings because they're seeking love. Once a man shows enough affection, it's easy for them to get emotionally invested. At first, he might spend money to build trust, and the woman thinks that someone willing to spend on her can't be a scammer. Gradually, she gets pulled into the situation he has created. Once she's emotionally invested, she starts to learn more about him and eventually gets asked for loans under various pretenses. She justifies this by thinking about how good he is to her, buying her gifts, introducing her to supposed friends, and even inviting her to his home. This leads her to believe there's nothing wrong. In reality, it's all just a well-crafted facade meant to deceive her. He'll start by borrowing small amounts, promising to pay her back soon. And when he does, it only reinforces her belief that he's not a scammer. Then he'll claim he's facing financial troubles at his company and might ask her to lend him hundreds of thousands or to take out a loan on his behalf, saying he needs to sort out some business accounts. He'll also mention that he might be slow to respond to calls and messages for a while. She waits for him, but eventually he disappears and all his pretenses vanish. It's hard for her to believe this is happening, and she might either cling to the hope that he'll come back or break down in tears. Scammers are strategic and skilled at identifying their targets, which is how they pull off these deceptions. In any romantic relationship, it's crucial to avoid financial entanglements and be mindful of spending. After all, he might just be a scammer. Women need to be discerning and not fall into traps easily. Scammers are quite clever, so it's important to rely on your instincts, recognize red flags, and be self-aware. Don't assume you're just an ordinary person who can easily attract a wealthy, rich, and handsome partner. There aren't that many individuals of this caliber genuinely interested in you, and those who seem to be might just be traps. So, ladies, stay alert and don't let yourselves become victims of romance scams.
The relationship standards of older single women sometimes seem so unattainable that only scammers running pig-butchering schemes can meet them. Take this story, for example. A woman in my group recently fell for one of these scams. The guy pretended to work for a highly classified government agency, claiming it made cohabitation impossible. He backed his story with fake documents, property deeds, academic degrees, even a forged work ID. He was generous, driving her to work and showering her with long, romantic messages. But as it turned out, those messages were copy-pasted from templates easily found online. After just over a week of knowing her, he suggested they buy a house together, asking her to chip in financially. This is the scammer's classic testing phase, where they assess the woman's family wealth before pulling the final con. Thankfully, this story had a different ending. When she shared her experience in the group, everyone called her out. That woke her up, and she cut ties with the scammer, deleting him from her contacts. But this incident highlights a bigger issue. The marriage expectations of many older single women might only be fulfilled by fraudsters. Here's why. Being a leftover woman has nothing to do with age and everything to do with mindset. That's why we see young leftover women, middle-aged leftover women, older leftover women, and even 3-no leftover women. No looks, no financial stability, no emotional stability. What these women share isn't their age but their unrealistic standards, which often stem from a lack of awareness and understanding about life and relationships. This low awareness doesn't just show up in their romantic lives but in every aspect of how they approach life. Why do these women fall so easily for scams? It's simple. They're single because their expectations are sky-high. Their demands usually boil down to 3 things: wealth, emotional intelligence, and looks. They want a man who's not only rich but also willing to spend lavishly on them, sometimes even transferring his assets into their name through dowries, shared property deeds, or handing over his income. At the same time, they expect him to have high emotional intelligence, someone who provides constant emotional support, knows how to talk and handles situations well. And on top of all that, he has to be good-looking. Many women in this group often say things like, "I couldn't possibly kiss an ugly man." But here's the problem. These three demands contradict each other. Sure, there are rich men willing to spend money on a woman, even transfer assets, but that's usually simp behavior. And if he's a fool, he's unlikely to have the emotional intelligence they're looking for. What about good-looking men? Handsome guys, or those with actor-level looks, typically have no shortage of options when it comes to women. They don't need to pour money or emotional support into one person, let alone to the extent these women demand. So, the combination of wealth, emotional intelligence, and looks forms an impossible triangle. Even if a man somehow ticks all three boxes, would he be interested in dating a single woman in her 30s? Do these women stand a chance? Absolutely not. At best, such men might engage in casual flings, maybe give some gifts or money, but a serious relationship? Not a chance. This reality is something many of these women fail to understand or refuse to accept. They don't want to acknowledge the gap between their fantasies and the actual options available to them. Now, many career-driven women in their 30s do have some savings, which is exactly what makes them prime targets for scammers. Scammers are experts at presenting themselves as the ideal man to match these lofty standards. Faking wealth is easy, and with a bit of training, sometimes just a few months, they can learn how to appear emotionally intelligent. Even looking good is achievable with makeup and better fashion. Armed with these tools, scammers can effortlessly ensnare these women. A viral case highlights this perfectly. A man stationed himself outside a tech company offering rideshare services. Over time, he scammed more than 10 women out of 20 million yuan. There's an old saying, the wealth of low-awareness people is only temporarily held by them. It always ends up in someone else's hands.
Today, I want to share a real story about a female teacher in Shenzhen who fell victim to a pig butchering scam. This teacher is someone I used to know personally. She's 36 now, but this happened when she was 35. Before she turned 35, she was very picky about relationships. She had a secure teaching job with an official position, which she believed made her financially and professionally stable. In Shenzhen, becoming a teacher requires a strong academic background, which made her even more selective in choosing a partner. One thing about her, though, is that she was a bit of a dreamer, not very grounded in reality. While most people start lowering their standards as they get older, she refused to do so. She believed she was special, unique, and destined to meet the perfect person. At 35, she thought that moment had finally come. She met a man through a matchmaking event. He was tall, 6 feet, handsome, and came from a wealthy family with several properties in Shenzhen. He even drove a Porsche to pick her up from work. She was convinced her patience had paid off. This was the man she'd been waiting for. But her happiness didn't last. 2 months into their relationship, she asked to see his properties. He told her he had some urgent business out of town but promised to take her to see them when he got back. Then, while he was away, he called her, claiming he needed an immediate cash transfer to cover a project's expenses. He promised he'd pay her back as soon as he returned to Shenzhen. Blinded by love and the excitement of their 2-month romance, she transferred him 300,000 yuan, around $40,000. That was the last she heard from him. He ghosted her, blocked her number, and disappeared completely. When she realized she'd been scammed, she was devastated. She hesitated to go to the police, worried her colleagues would find out and mock her. After much deliberation, she filed a report. But the police said they couldn't pursue the case because the money had been sent voluntarily. Now, at 36, she's still single. Some might think being single isn't a big deal, especially in a city like Shenzhen, where many women are financially independent. But as the years go by, the pressures of aging can wear down even the strongest person. When your body starts reminding you of the passing time, and suddenly the perfect love appears, it's easy to ignore red flags and convince yourself that this person is your Prince Charming. For many older women, this is when they stop thinking rationally, or feel like they don't have the time to. That's why I'm making this video, to warn women, especially older women working and living in places like Shenzhen, to be extra vigilant. Female teachers, in particular, often work in sheltered and straightforward environments, making them easy targets for scammers. Remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
There's a new wave of advanced pig butchering scams sweeping across the country, specifically targeting single, materialistic older women. These scams are faster than outright robbery, with the added twist of emotional manipulation and seduction. While such schemes have existed before, they've become especially rampant lately. What's worse, many victims willingly fall into the trap without realizing what's happening. Here's how it works. Unsold properties are piling up in areas like Daya Bay and the Pearl River Delta. Developers are struggling to recoup their investments, and real estate agents are seeing their incomes shrink. To move these properties quickly, scammers have devised a scheme that preys on single older women, typically those with average looks and modest means. The scammers start by building a connection with their target. They flirt, go on dates, and after a few meetings, confess their love. They promise to gift the woman a house, claiming it will be registered solely in her name. Let's face it, who wouldn't be tempted by such an offer? They assure the woman that they'll handle the down payment but ask her to take out a mortgage in her name, with the promise that they'll repay the loan. In reality, the supposed down payment is fake. The scammer has already arranged a zero-down deal with the developer. At this point, the woman is convinced she's finally met her Prince Charming. After waiting so many years, she believes her patience has paid off. A man offering her a multi-million yuan house, registered in her name? She's over the moon, completely devoted, and eager to cooperate. But here's the catch. Once the paperwork is signed and the mortgage approved, the scammer disappears. He blocks her, ends the relationship, and vanishes without a trace. By then, they've also been physically intimate, and she's left saddled with a 30-year debt. Meanwhile, the scammer walks away with his cut of the agent commission. Now think about it, how do you break this cycle? Every step is legal. Both parties acted voluntarily, leaving no room for the law to intervene. These scammers are pulling this off every day, competing with each other to see who can con more women. They get the money, enjoy the physical benefits, and leave the women to deal with the wreckage. The saddest part? Many of these materialistic women don't even realize they've been scammed. Instead, they blame themselves, thinking they did something wrong, and even beg the scammer to come back. Given the current downturn in the housing market, these properties are virtually unsellable. The women are left with crushing debt, becoming credit defaulters, which makes it nearly impossible to find a partner in the future. Some are even forced into desperate measures to make quick money, leading them down a dark and irreversible path. This isn't just an isolated story, it's happening every day, right now, to countless older unmarried women.